Parents and twin sister kicked me out at 16. I lived in a tent and struggled for years. Now I have a house, and they showed up uninvited with my sister's family, demanding to move in. My sister asked my parents to throw me out of my house at 16, saying there's no space for me. I struggled for 12 years to have my own place, and now they are parading to let my sister move in with me because she's pregnant with her 4th child. I, 28 have been suffering from my parents' toxicity ever since childhood. I have a twin sister who has been my pain in the butt. People say twins back up each other. In my case, my twin pulls me down to the bottom whenever she gets a chance. If bullying in my childhood was not enough, she reappeared in my life. This time she wants to move into my house with her family despite being the one who threw me out of the house at 16. She has always been narcissistic. It is mostly because of the wrong parenting. My parents always wanted a daughter, but they got a son along with it. They even told this on my face that they would have terminated the pregnancy if it was just me. Just because there was a girl in there, they had to bring me into the world. So, I owe my life to my sister. My sister would miss no opportunity to rub her entitlement on my face. You can very well imagine my childhood, growing up in a household where I was unwanted. Everything was just about my sister. We were of the same age, yet I was not allowed to touch her toys. She gets a new set of clothes now and then, while I get only a pair of clothes at Christmas and one on our birthday. If we didn't share our birthday, they wouldn't even bother celebrating it. Oh, I just realized if I didn't share my birthday with my sister, I wouldn't exist. I got the bare minimum thing, and the two was not out of blood but to save their faces from the judgmental eyes of the relatives. The only good thing about my childhood was my grandfather. He was the only one who was able to see through their BS. Sadly, he passed away when I was 13. That was the worst thing about my life. I had no one to have my back. We lived in a tiny house in the suburbs. My sister and I shared a room. It was more like, I had a bed and a tiny closet beneath my bed in my sister's room. The entire room was filled with her clothes, toys, and posters. I was not even allowed to complain because according to my parents, they were doing enough for me. My sister didn't like my presence in her room. I was allowed in the room only in the night to sleep. Even when I was sick, I would have to lie down on the couch and not in my room because she is a girl and she needs privacy. I desperately wanted to be 18 so that I could move out of the house. Looks like my family were far more desperate to get rid of me. When we were 16, my sister got knocked up by a 19-year-old loser. His parents had thrown him out of the house when he failed thrice in the 8th grade. My parents got them married and my father got him a cleaner's job at his factory. My father is a mechanic and works at an automobile manufacturing company. My parents brought him home, so obviously I had to move out of my room to make space for him. But our house had only 2 rooms and a tiny living space. I asked if I could sleep on the couch, but my father denied it, saying he sleeps on the couch when my mom's snoring becomes unbearable on winter nights. I was asked if on the clates on my couch. Do I feel into my situation? My loser build would say, dude, it's ass tough to find a place for myself. My parents threw me out when I was 15 and yet I was able to put my life together. Now I have a family. Trust me, it's gonna get better out there, I sighed. Yeah, if living off as a junkie means putting life together and knocking up a minor means family to you, then sure. Most of my relatives live far off the place, and moreover my parents threatened me not to show up at any of the relatives' places because that would mean exposing my parents' toxicity. I requested a few of my friends to lend me their couch to sleep, but there was no luck. Why on earth would their parents allow me in their house when my own parents kicked me out? But one of my classmates was lending in their garage. He let me in for a few months until his parents saw me there and kicked me out. I slept on a bench on the sidewalk for a few days until I was rounded up by the cops and brought home. My parents made up the story that I'd run away from home. They took me in that night. My father got me a makeshift tent from a junkyard and asked me to use the space in the backyard to set up my place. It was a reward for remaining silent in front of the cops and obeying their orders of not showing up at the relatives. Tent was still safer than sleeping in the open. Summer was still okay, but winter was terrible. One day it was still cold. I felt I was almost going to die of freezing. I knocked on my house, but no one responded. I desperately needed help. I knocked on my parents' bedroom window. My dad yelled from inside not to disturb him, else he'd come out and knock me down. I felt so miserable that at one point I wanted to die. I cried for the whole night. The next day, I went searching for a job that would lend me a space to sleep. One of the bakery shops needed a worker for his factory that was like 20 miles away, but he agreed to give me a place to sleep and even offered me food. Basically, they baked it in their house and needed a helping hand. They offered me to live in their backyard, but I would have to clean it up. I agreed. The place was pretty messed up with flour and sugar all over the place. Not to mention their rodents surviving on them. But I always have to live with plenty out life. I readily took that job. I packed up my stuff and left. My sister was even happy and said, "Good that you're leaving. We don't have space for you here." No one even bothered to ask me where I was going. I cleaned up the place and made it habitable. Initially, it was difficult to get rid of the rodents when they came searching for food, but eventually, I felt cozy living there. I had to drop out of high school. There were a few more months left for the final year exams. My friends told me to continue living in my parents' backyard and complete high school, but I worked hard in my job and lived off my salary. Soon enough I realized I had to upskill myself to get a job. I worked up his skills. My dad is a mechanic, so I grew up playing with his toolbox. Worked for my parents. They didn't have to get me toys, plus I helped dad in plumbing the house. I saved up and took up a course and a job at a car plant. I worked my ass off to climb up the ladder. Now I'm a supervisor. Recently, one of my old friends was selling off his house urgently. He has some divorce issues and he wanted an immediate buyer. I was reluctant to buy a 3-bedroom house, but he offered me a hefty discount on the market price and agreed to accept the down payment in parts. I grabbed it 2 weeks back. I moved into my new house and today I found unscripted desks in the door. Yes, my grandparents, sister, and Bill. It was a surprise for me because I was NC with them all these years. Neither did they reach out to me. This house of mine is nearly 15 miles away from their place. So there's no way they would have bumped here casually. I'm not in touch with any of the relatives, neither in person nor on social media, but I'm guessing it's the neighbor. I'm still friends with one of my neighbors. He might have seen the pictures of my house on Facebook and told my parents about it. I still have no idea how they figured out the exact address. Between and asked her to attend to her youngest son who wailing for attention. I looked at my parents and asked them what the hell she just said. Dad told me that accommodating 7 heads in a small house was getting difficult. My sister's eldest son, 14, was sleeping on the couch while the middle one slept with my parents and the youngest one with my sister. And top of that, she is pregnant again, so they need a big house. I screamed and Mom said, and you own a big house now. Can't you take your sister with you? Before she completed her sentence, I yelled, hell no. I'm not going to take anyone inside my house. My sister screamed at me that I owed her this to bring me into this world. The same old thing, Mom and Dad would have never birthed you if I wasn't there. You owe me a place here. That house has become so crowded I can't even breathe. I said, yes, thanks to you. And thanks for bringing me into this world. Now get out. Before anyone could say anything, I asked them to leave my house now. Dad tried to use his tough method, raised his voice, and said, it was my duty as a man of the house to take care of my sister. I yelled back at him that I held no obligations to take care of my sister, but as a parent, they were obliged to take care of me, but faltered. Now he was okay with his grandson sleeping on the couch, but when I asked for it, he refused it and threw me out of the house. I ranted about how I survived with rodents at my employer's garage and how I had been living in a dingy apartment for a decade, but none of them came to check on me. My mom started sobbing and tried to hug me. I blocked her and asked them to leave. Bill was like, man up bro. I've also lived that life for so many years. I never complained. You have such a big house. You are single. What are you gonna do with so much space? I gestured at him to shut up. My sister started cussing me for shouting at her husband. I said, well then get out if you don't want me to knock him down. I chased them out of my house without letting them speak a word. I'm fuming with anger. They were forever toxic and narcissistic, and now they have turned greedy, but I'm not 16yo anymore who would follow their orders like a puppet. If they pester me further, I won't hesitate to call the cops on them. Update 1. My sister and her junkie husband broke into my house. BTW, some of you asked in the comment if my sister offered to pay rent. The answer is a big no. She hasn't and she can't afford rent. She and her junkie are freeloaders and child milling machines. They have been piling upon my parents for 12 years and now they want to do it with me. Not that my parents are happy providing for her. I saw the frustrations in their eyes when they last visited me. However, instead of just throwing her out, they are offloading those lazy bumps to my shoulder. A week after the first encounter with them, my mom showed up at my house again. This time she didn't beat around the bush and told me I should put my guard down and let my sister move in with me. I said no way. She basically repeated the same stuff, that it was difficult to accommodate so many people in a small house, blah blah. Still no for me. Then she switched her gear and tried to threaten me. I should have taken the hint right away. She said, see honey, you live alone in this big house and you're gone for 12 hours a day. What if someone breaks into your house? If a family lives here, it would be so safe for you. Besides, you'll get a hand on cleaning the house and doing the dishes and the laundry. I said for the last time, no, and go away. I don't want any of you at my house. Just a few days later, one of my neighbors told me he saw a pregnant woman with a man and a young boy loitering around on my premises. They were peeping in from the window, wandering around the backyard, and it felt like they were trying to sneak in. He is an old man. He sits by his front porch for the whole of the afternoon. When they noticed my neighbor was staring at them, they went away. He came to inform me as a goodwill gesture. I thanked him and gave him my number. I requested him to call me if he saw them ever again. My house was not guarded with cameras. I was intending to install it over the weekend. Who knew they would break in before that? Just 2 days later, I got a call from this elderly neighbor saying he suspected someone had broken into my house. I rushed home in a panic. He was right. My sister and Bill had broken into my house from the backside window. She was like, we didn't have any other options than this. You were being a jerk and not allowing us. Now we live here and you suck it up. I was in shock. I mean, how far she went to rub her entitlement onto my face. Bill came outside of the room in which they had made their bedroom. He was like, it was pretty smooth, huh? Without thinking twice, I charged at Bill. My sister came in between and I dragged her aside. I punched him in the face. Their 14yo son attacked me with a bottle and my head started bleeding. The blow was not severe and I was in my senses. On the verge of blackout, but the rage kept me on. They all panicked seeing the blood. My sister called up my parents and told them what happened. Bill and his son started cleaning the mess. My neighbor called the cops. My sister and Bill started apologizing and begged me to spare their son from being arrested. I said all of you would go down with him. The cops arrived and took my statement. My sister denied all the allegations of breaking in and assaulting me. She said she was visiting my house with her family. Her son played a prank on me and I accidentally slipped and hurt my head. I was mad at them and that's why I was falsely framing them. What a liar. Meanwhile, my parents arrived and they forced me to drop the charges against them. They all ganged up to prove me a liar and said I was using the cops to extract my grudge against my sister. Thank God my neighbor pitched in and gave a statement, and based on that, the cops arrested them. They had to spend the night behind bars because my parents didn't have the money to bail them out. The next day, they were presented for trial. I went to the hospital and got my wounds dressed. The doctor scanned it for internal injury. I had to take a couple of days off to nurse my wounds. I pressed the assault charges on them and also claimed compensation for my loss, and the court agreed that they should bear it. Meanwhile, my parents tried all means to make me drop the charges, but I threatened to sue them for planning the assault on me. Her son is a minor, so he was dealt with according to the juvenile law. He got a week in a juvenile facility and his parents would have to pay for restitution, lost wage, and medical bills. Sister and Bill were fined heavily, but they pleaded to trade off a part of it with community service. It's been a week since then and it has been silent. I hope they have got their lesson and they should stay away from me. Update 2. Looks like my parents are not off my back yet. Yesterday, they showed up at my house again. I slammed the door in their face. They stood outside for almost an hour requesting me to hear them out. Finally, I had to let them in. I wish I could just yell from the window and threaten them to knock them down like Dad did to me 12 years ago. Anyways, I asked them why they were again at my door. They both started sobbing and said they needed my help. I said if this has to do anything with my sister, then count me out. They said it was about them. Dad goes, "You see, I'm growing old and fragile. I cannot work as before. Our house hasn't been repaired in many years. Everything is falling apart." I cut him in between and said, "Come to the point." He and Mom wanted to move in with me. As a responsible son, I should take them in. I should have if they were a responsible parent, but they were not. I asked them what would happen to their house and if they're going to terminate the lease. They said they're going to give that house to my sister. I was like, oh cool, you guys have taken an alternate route to exploit me. Earlier you tried to dump sister on my back. That plan failed. Now you want to pile on. For the one last time, my house is not up for grabs. Not for anyone. They said my sister was offering to pay me the rent for living in my house, which I can use to pay the mortgage. I said I don't need the rent. She doesn't have to be bothered about my mortgage problem. She should instead look out for herself. Mom started crying that it was becoming very difficult for my sister to make ends meet. She doesn't even get proper sleep because her children sleep in the same room. I said it's not my problem if she is mindlessly expanding her family without financial planning. They were like, what could we say? You're not agreeing to anything. Neither do you want to take in your sister. Nor you are agreeing for us. You should at least let us move in with you. The house is too big for a single man. I said I don't plan to remain single forever. They tried to emotionally manipulate me that I should take care of my aging parents. I screamed karma is real. Remember how you threw me out of the house? This is what you get back in return. I opened the door for them and they left with bitter faces. I don't care what they call me, but I'm not going to be a doormat and give in to their demand.